Top of the morning, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the Waterstone Media Podcast. As always, I am joined by the single greatest human being who has ever lived on the face of this earth, Taylor Crook. Taylor, how are you doing this week?
I'm good, and don't fact check that. You can believe Ryan. All of that is true, so no fact checking needed.
I would actually say fact checking completely allowed, because what is there to find except the truth?
Yeah, there you go. Perfect. Does it ever concern you that you say top of the morning to everybody, but sometimes they might not be listening to this in the morning?
Never once.
Never once. Okay, good. Good. Stick to your guns. I like that.
I actually, for the email that I send out every other week for Waterstone Media, I start out every single email top of the morning, even though I know that when the email actually goes out for the vast majority of my international readers, it is not in the morning. But I like the saying. I think it's a very pleasant greeting.
Yeah.
It gets the day started on the right foot. So
For sure.
I'm going to stick with it.
I appreciate that.
Taylor, how's your week been?
Good. I have I was gifted 5 days off of work as I take the silver lining approach to my last week. I tested positive for COVID, but it was very mild. I sometimes had a cough is the way I'm describing it, because it wasn't even like I had a consistent cough or anything. My throat was a little scratchy. I was on the way. No, I woke up with a scratchy throat. I was trying to find some rapid tests, but I just popped up to my work because they have them, and I tested, and I was positive. So they had to cover 5 of my shifts. I got to do 5 extra days of writing, or 5 extra nights, I guess, because I write every day anyway. And back to work today. So like I said, I feel fine. My wife didn't pick it up either. So it's just a very mild 5-day vacation for me. So that was all right.
Fantastic. Well, we are, of course, glad that you are okay. And I figured I would actually give you the honors this week of introducing the topic, being as it was your idea for what we were talking about this week.
Yeah. So Ryan and I, generally speaking, the night before the podcast, realized that we have to decide on what we're going to talk about the next day. So came up with our favorite characters. And I don't know if we specifically said fantasy books, but our favorite characters in books. A couple of mine, or one of mine is science fiction. So at any rate, our favorite characters, and I'm sure Ryan has some very probing and intelligent questions about why they are favorite characters, as he tends to. So that's going to be our topic for today, our topic du jour, if you will.
I did have some interesting questions that came up for me as I was thinking about this, but we'll start off pretty simple. And that is with the question of what makes a character your favorite character. What were the criteria that you were using to make this, albeit incomplete, list? I know I had to pick and choose out of a list that was much longer than what we'll be talking about today.
Yeah, similar to most of my decisions in life, it was sort of a gut feel thing. I think one of the bigger criteria was, well, if it's a POV style, is that character's POV the one I look forward to the most? That seemed like an easy one for me. So if I was always looking forward to that character's POV, that's probably a favorite character of mine. There was also sort of I thought a bit about what that character meant, maybe not just in the story, but in terms of what they were representative of. If they carried some weight or some meaning to me, which one of the characters definitely did, more so than the other criteria I used was, is this character fun? I tend to enjoy a character that has some levity and breaks up the necessary drama of science fiction or fantasy that occurs. And that tends to be the character I lean towards a little bit. So those are sort of the mix of things that I had in mind. Did you have a little more specific criteria when you were looking at yours?
No, but it was difficult for me to decide what qualified as a favorite. And I think that a lot of my decision process was very similar to yours. It was just that gut reaction of who is my favorite character in sci-fi and fantasy. And one of the themes that came up for me is complex characters who I would want to spend more time with. I think characters that I would be more than happy to reread, which is a very rare occurrence for me. Those were the ones that stuck out in my mind as those who made the list.
Yeah, that makes sense. I get that. I think that's a maybe you put it a little better than I did, but that's sort of what my first criteria was as well in terms of that. Like, what's the weight? What's the emotional weight of this character?
It's interesting for me because I have one at least who is more on the entertaining side of the spectrum, at least in my mind. But there are two that are actually very serious. They're not very funny, and I found that to be a little bit surprising. I thought that I would choose more who were more entertaining, that I enjoyed just spending time in their head or in their POV. So,
yeah, I get what you mean for sure.
Well, let's get this party started then. Taylor, I don't know if yours are in any particular order, but why don't you name your first favorite character?
So I'm going with, and I mean, again, there's a bit of recency bias as well with some of this, but I'm going with Morn Highland, who is essentially your protagonist in the Gap Cycle, which I'm currently rereading. But I really did ask myself, and she does stick out, and always has stuck out as a character for me that I have always enjoyed. So she is my first choice.
What about her makes her one of your favorites?
So it's funny that you said about, maybe they're not the most entertaining. This poor woman is, it's a rough go for her. The series is pretty brutal in setting up her struggles. And, as a warning, and I think I mentioned this before when I mentioned the Gap Cycle, it is a lot of abuse. It's a lot of, I really don't think that the author, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't think that the author romanticizes or fetishizes or, is really overindulging in the abuse, and there's some sexual abuse in there. And I think he's not romanticizing as much as he's just trying to show how brutal it could be for a woman to be in this situation. But I always do. Anytime I recommend the series, I warn people that it's a pretty rough start. The first book and the beginning of the second book, it's tough, but it really does shape her and her strength as a character. And I think that's the biggest thing for me, is that this entire series, everything that you're invested in throughout the entire series is essentially on the back of her as this, not a victim, but a survivor. And most of the other characters are of dubious quality in terms of whether or not they're good people, their moral standing. Whereas at the end of the day, Morn might compromise on some things to survive, but at the end of the day, she's just doing what she has to do to survive based on circumstances that she couldn't control. So there's just a strength in her that I admire, and just a perseverance that makes her feel like a hero in a really real world sense, as opposed to a hero chosen by prophecy walking the golden path. She's a hero to herself and then to some of those around her. I don't want to get into too many spoilers for anyone that's interested in the series, but yeah, she's something a little different and a little darker, but definitely a little bit more special for that reason.
I really like what you said about being a hero, but maybe not a hero of mythological stature. One of the things that really attracts me to a lot of these characters is that they are so human and imperfect and flawed. And having that, I would almost call it a heroic flaw, where it is their source of strength, but also a source of weakness for them. That is a piece that I've always just been fascinated by.
Yeah, I agree. And you know, she's competent as well. She's an ensign for the United Mining Company's police force. So she's trained and competent, and circumstances sort of throw her into this situation. But wherever she goes, in addition to doing whatever it takes to survive, she proves herself over and over again to whomever she's with, and gains their trust, and becomes a member of, you know, the crew, and an invaluable member of the crew on various ships. And just her ability to adapt to everything. She's just this very strong, intelligent woman. And I always appreciate that in a character, male or female, obviously. But there is a history of the damsel in distress in our preferred genres, I find, and it's nice it was nice to see that not being the case. This is a damsel that did everything she could to save herself, and in the end succeeds. So I think there's an enjoyable quality in that for sure.
I feel like that actually leads in very well to my first choice, who is named Arlen from the Warded Man, which I think I have been talking about recently on this podcast. I
want to say it was our magical weapons and spells thing, because you were talking about the wards.
Yes! Excellent memory, because of the wards being the method by which the demons are repelled. Yes, good memory, Taylor.
I listen when you talk, man.
But at least somebody is. But what I love about Arlen, like your typical unfortunate fantasy protagonist, his story is shaped by a tragic series of events. But the characteristic that perhaps defines him more than any other is the courage that he displays in how he approaches the world. He lives in a brutal world where every night these demons basically rise from the ground and just slaughter whatever humans they can get their hands on that are not hidden behind wards. So it's a very terrifying world in which only the daylight is safe. And many humans have more or less settled for the status quo. And he is the one individual who is so driven to do something about it that following his journey is inspiring, maybe is the right word, where it makes you want to be the sort of person who tackles problems that seem insurmountable at first.
Yeah, that's nice too, because again, you're not talking about the, you know, prototypical prophecy has selected this person. You're looking at someone that has agency, that says, no, I'm going to do something about this. I'm going to fight. I agree. I like that too.
And it also leads to his flaw, which I also find to be really interesting, and it's explored more near the end of the book. But there is a line, and I'll paraphrase here, this is not exact, but he says something along the lines of, he has become so obsessed with fighting against the demons that he has forgotten what he was originally fighting for the people that he was supposed to protect. And I really like that, and you see that character growth from child to young man, and you see the sacrifices that he makes. And I have read The Warded Man twice now, and have been impressed by Arlen on both read-throughs. I've really enjoyed seeing the world through the eyes of just that sheer level of determination.
Yeah, I like that.
So, Taylor.
So number two is a little bit more on the entertaining side of things, but we're going back to the old standard for me, the Sword of Truth series, and it's Zed, who is the protagonist's grandfather, and sort of acts as the mystical mentor role in the story. And he's enjoyable. I find him to be a character that is written with a lot of humor. which I enjoy. He sort of breaks that up. And in addition to that, he's very powerful. But as is sort of the case with the mystical mentor, his power isn't enough. He's there to guide and et cetera, et cetera. But I think what I like most about Zed is that at one point in his younger days, he was the first wizard of the Midlands and was incredibly powerful. And in fact, fuck shit up. He did a lot of things, which I always find, that's sort of one of my things with Gandalf is it's like, what do you do, man? Like, what do you really do? You ride your horse and you look at books, you fight a Balrog. I get it. But what do you do? Whereas Zed, there's actually a little companion novella, and I will never remember that. It might be called First Wizard, but where you see sort of the story that leads up and the reason that he fled to where he is and he hides who he is. And, his Richard, the main character, thinks that he's his grandfather. He might be his grandfather, actually. I can't really remember what the turn is there, but doesn't know he's a wizard, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I think it's really cool. And they do a nice job or I guess he does a nice job throughout the book of just threading in these little moments where it shows just how powerful Zed is, and under pretty much any other circumstances, aside from these sort of world-ending ones that the main character is taking on, Zed would be more than capable of handling himself. And it's neat to have those moments threaded throughout the story. And he's a cool guy. He does things out. He likes to eat. He finds a girl and an older woman as well, a sorceress, and they strike up a little relationship that's a lot of fun. He hits all the beats in terms of a character, like a support character that I really enjoy.
It's interesting to me that you chose somebody who is not actually the main protagonist of the story. And all of mine are probably qualify as protagonists, and that is fascinating to me that somebody who is a support character, not even the focus of the story, was able to make such an impression on you that
my next one is a support character as well. The protagonists are fine, but I do tend to gravitate towards the support characters in terms of things I really enjoy. I love Goku, but Piccolo's my guy. Like it's just I don't know if it's just the way I'm wired or what it is, but those support characters do tend to speak to me a little bit more, I find.
You call him Piccolo, I just call him Gohan's true father.
Gohan's true father. Also true.
What? So I can't let that go without one of my patented probing questions, but what do you think it is about the role of a support character that appeals to you so much instead of your primary protagonist, do you think?
I'm not sure. There might be... Maybe it's that sort of bit of levity that I enjoy. That there's a little more room for that because generally speaking, your protagonist is going through a pretty severe arc of development, which requires serious things to happen and serious, replies to that. It's really hard to say, but there's a number of other support characters, even just in the Sword of Truth series that I could pick out that I really enjoy. Now, Sword of Truth is kind of a bad example because as a protagonist, Richard is a bit of a, dud. He just, he's got this moral standard and, I find his arc to be pretty shallow overall. And it's just, it pretty much comes down to, I don't like violence, but I have to do violence in order to save the world. So I'll do violence. And it's just repetitions of that. I mean, I've never read a series wherein the author justifies the main character killing his enemies more than he does in this book. It's just constant. It is a constant. And through the first 2 or 3, it's fine. But then as you go, it's just like, yeah, we get it, man. We know you don't want to. We know you by now. But I just find his arc to be kind of shallow. So maybe that's a bad example. But I mean, I don't know. I'd say the same thing of Lord of the Rings. My favorite characters in that are certainly not Frodo. So I don't know. Maybe it's just the way I'm wired.
So I'm actually really curious. Maybe this explains your deep love for the Marvel Cinematic Universe as well. Are the characters that really draw you in with that the supporting comic relief that coexist by your superheroes?
No. With that, it's still the heroes. I still think it's the heroes. You know, the Darcys of the world are fine, but I think, but that maybe that doesn't have to do with the fact that, you know, they do such a good job of writing that humor into your protagonist anyway. You know, Iron Man is funny. Thor is good. You know, if you're looking at Guardians, it's all, you know, there's lots of humor there. So no, I wouldn't say that necessarily. Maybe it falls more into the literature of things, but
fair enough. Well, in the spirit of going with slightly more entertaining, I will follow your lead. Mine are in no particular order. I just chose 3 from random out of a very long list. Mostly the 3 that popped first to mind. But I'm going to butcher his last name because it's been a long time since I've read this book. But Snorri Snargerson from the Red Queen's War by Mark Lawrence.
I've not heard of any of those words.
He is... Snorri is his first name. I cannot guarantee that I pronounced his second name correctly, and there's every chance that transcription will completely botch this. But he is essentially this almost comically stereotypical, enormous Viking warrior who comes from a land of snow and ice and hardship and struggle. And he is brave and noble and friendly to all. He makes a friend wherever he goes. But what makes him so entertaining is that he is paired with just a scoundrel of a protagonist who is a womanizer, a cheat, a thief, a coward, self-proclaimed coward. And it is like the best of a buddy cop show where 2 unlikely partners have to, in this case, literally save the world. And so Snorri is very entertaining, just that he provides such a wonderful foil to the main character. But not only that, he has his own story and his own arc, and there is darkness that is lurking in his past. He is, of course, being a fantasy protagonist, driven by tragedy and very focused on his own mission. But there's just nothing more entertaining than seeing all of his great qualities come to the fore as a foil to this rather terrible main character. And I don't know if I have ever laughed or cried harder at the same character over the course of a single trilogy.
All right. I like that. And I think I like the buddy cop description because I agree. I think that is a very good dynamic. And I think it's, you know, I've got a somewhat similar dynamic in Infernal Shadow with Torin and Tamaris. And I think that reminds me of that. I mean, I could be wrong, but it sounds about right.
Like that, only dialed up even a little bit higher.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool. The difference between them is
that's always, and I mean that's comedy 101, right? You know, disparate personalities. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so one of the things that I really appreciate about that series is that when as his arc matures and completes, because he's been such an entertaining character for so long, when it switches and turns serious, it hits very hard. And I'm
that's cool
that,
too.
So, okay, Taylor, the moment of truth. Character number 1. Who is your favorite character of all time?
That's
no debate.
not what we're asking. This is no particular order. So in no particular order, My number 3 is Amos from The Expanse. Just there's something about a quiet badass that might also be a sociopath, but is sort of in with the good guys. I am 100% here for that any day of the week. So I think anybody that has read The Expanse or even seen the show, I don't think there's much explanation needed for why Amos would be there. Bobby Draper was up there as well for me. She's up, but there's something about the mild sociopathy of Amos that makes me I'm into it.
Can we just agree that Amos was perfectly cast?
So, for whatever reason, with The Expanse, I pictured every single character like 10 to 15 years older than they are in the show. Like in the show, they all seem to be in their like late 20s, maybe early 30s. I was picturing this as a crew of like grizzled, sort of late 30s, early 40s, like veterans. And Amos in particular, I always felt described as, I pictured him as just this sort of like bigger dude, but not cut, like sort of like you would see like a middle-aged cop where they're strong and you wouldn't want to mess with them, but it's not like they're like a triangle. They're just sort of bulky and just like, and I pictured him bald. I don't know. I just went off on my own, I guess. But I didn't like the casting of almost any of them outside of Bobby Draper. I thought Bobby Draper was cast well in that. But aside from that, I just pictured them all older. Like it was a different in my head. So I liked the character and I liked the actor and how they did it in the show. But for whatever reason, I was off by a decade in their age. I don't know.
I may have had the opposite experience because I actually watched season 1 of The Expanse before I started reading the books. But when I read the books, all I could think was
and listen,
Amos
it's been a while since I've read the book. Yeah.
Just in every way, he's just perfect.
The actor nails the mannerisms and how he behaves and everything. But anyway, he's definitely my favorite of that series for sure.
Yes, I would agree. I also have a deep love.
I think everyone does. I defy you to find someone who doesn't think that that's a great character.
Oh, we're on the internet. Just give it a few minutes. My character, who is not my favorite of all time, without debate, but again, just another character that I really enjoy. And I went back and forth on this one a little bit, but I'm going to go with Eren Yeager from Attack on Titan. He is a character who is time and time again thrust into horrible circumstances, difficult situations, having to make really terrible choices. But we talked a little bit earlier about how sometimes a person's heroic qualities can also be their greatest downfall. And I think that Eren is a character that almost epitomizes that problem, where he is brave and vengeful and incredibly loyal to his friends and the people that he loves, which are all of those qualities are incredible sources of strength for him throughout the series. But as the series develops and we watch Eren age and get older, we see how those values can lead to what could probably be objectively called some very terrible decisions. And I love seeing that arc in a character where a value that we would usually think of being so positive, such as loyalty and courage and love for your friends and your family, could really be twisted under the right circumstances. And I think it's a fascinating character study, and I am here for that. He is not a happy character. He is not very enjoyable to spend time around, but I'm actually rereading the story now from the start because I want to experience it all again. I'm fascinated in picking up all the clues along the way, knowing now what he's going to become.
Yeah, it's funny that I think all three of your characters, the first and last, the most so, are so indicative to me of your strength as an author in developing characters. I think it's funny that to see that reflected in what you enjoy, and it makes sense. It makes total sense that the thing you enjoy in stories is something that you are very good at in your own. But it's interesting to see it in both in all your characters, really, that development and that arc is such an important thing to you.
Yeah, I suppose that's a good point. It's not really something that I think about, but it would make sense that the characters that I enjoy writing the most are the ones that I also enjoy reading.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the same, like Beast, both Tamaris and Torin in Infernal Shadow, and then our newest protagonist they're all that sort of quippy kind of funny guy, and that's it makes sense that I enjoy writing that and reading that sort of in equal measure.
You are the man who has brought humor back into my works, thanks to our work with Beast.
Yeah, Beast is fun.
Well, I feel like it's rubbed off on my own personal work too, where my last Sword series also has more entertaining characters, I think, in terms of just being funny and fun to spend time with. So it's interesting how that worked out.
And I think I said to you, just in writing those 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 intermediary chapters that I didn't have before for Infernal Shadow, just the amount that Sentinels has informed my authorship. It's interesting. It's a sort of side effect of the collaboration that I maybe didn't anticipate. Like, I assumed I would learn a lot from you, having you being an established author and me not knowing as much, but to see how much has really rubbed off, and to especially to be going back to an existing work of mine where I can look chapter to chapter of this existing chapter, and this is the chapter that I wrote now to fill in. The amount I can see my writing change, and it's a direct correlation to Sentinels, is pretty crazy.
Interesting. So, any final words on favorite characters before we close?
No, just that Taylor? I think I'm gonna have to try and think about who my favorite character of all time is in a book, and I don't know if I'm ever gonna have that answer. I feel like that is just too nebulous a concept for me to say this is my favorite character of all time. You'd think that if Ender's Game is my favorite book, then it would make Ender my favorite character. But I thought about him briefly, but he just didn't. As much as I do enjoy Ender, and I really do, I don't know. It's funny. It's funny how that is. I think it's just one of those. As humans, whatever, we have a desire to quantify things. I think top 10 lists are always exciting, but I think when it comes right down to it, for me personally, I don't like setting things in stone like that. I don't like saying this is my favorite and this is of all time and whatever. I think in a moment, in a mood, on a rainy day versus a sunny day, a character's value to me could change drastically. So I think that's the biggest takeaway I've had from this exercise, is that concept is always going to kind of be nebulous to me, which is, I think, what makes it fun.
What I thought was really interesting as I was going through this process is that the characters that jumped immediately to mind for me were often limited by genre. I would say if we were to expand this list, if we were to make it our top 20 characters, I would be willing to bet that maybe only 2 or 3 come from sci-fi for me, whereas far more would come from fantasy and also thrillers. I like thrillers too, and some of the characters there, but and I find that interesting. I don't know if I necessarily have an explanation for that. It probably has a lot to do with just the types of sci-fi that I read and the types of fantasy that I read. But yeah, far and away, my favorite characters are in fantasy.
Interesting.
Yeah. Cool. Well, as always, transcription, show notes, everything found online. Like, subscribe if you're on the YouTubes. Otherwise, Taylor, it has been a true pleasure learning about your top 3 favorite all-time, no debate, 3, 2, 1 listed favorite characters that you will not listen to any debate about. And for everybody else, thank you once again for joining us this week, and
thanks, everyone.
Talk soon.